네, 여러분 안녕하십니까?
Hello. From now on, let us start a session on with pandemic changes in the industrial environment and sustainable global co-prosperity strategy. I am Jeju, your MC today. First of all, let me introduce our moderator. Chairman and CEO Kim Jun is member of the board of the East Asia Foundation. I will give him a mic.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kim Jun. Unfortunately, we were not able to have one of our presenters, lawmaker Yang. So please understand this unexpected absence. And before we begin our session, let me briefly introduce Professor An Chung-young. Well, I don't think we really need a introduction because he is a very famous economist in Korea and he is teaching at Chungang University. And he is very renowned in Korean in their relations and from government and academia and economy. He has been playing a very important role and he used to be a direct advisor to the president. And he used to work for the IPEC and the board of directors for Korea Electricity. And he was also an important member of the chairman of the Korea Trade Association. So from a very overall perspective of economy to the trade issues, he has been deeply involved. And he has abundant experiences. So let me gladly invite him for his presentation. Professor An, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really delighted to join this session. As a matter of fact, this is my participation of Jejuporam. Now let me see, 10th in a row. Well, the topic for this session with the pandemic, changes in industrial environment and the sustainable global co-prosperity strategies. Seems to me the topic is very broad and very diverse. We can approach, from many different angles. I would like to focus on the implications of the corona pandemic and what Asia Pacific economies should design a new economic strategy to combat current ongoing pandemic and even the post-corona period. Henry Kissinger, the well-known international strategist, former Secretary of the U.S. State Department, he indicated that the world will never be the same after this pandemic, the era. In fact, the last year, world economy exhibited negative 3.3% growth. But fortunately, this year, the world economy is expected to bounce back 6%. Most importantly, the world economy has experienced a very acute income polarization, top-notch high income bracket and the bottom, the low income bracket, because of the ongoing, the massive, the unemployment, and also the substantial, the reduction of the global trade. As a matter of fact, because of the pandemic, global supply chain system has totally broke down. That's what we observed last year. As a result, trade growth last year recorded negative 10% point plus. This is worse than since the second oil shock, in which we experienced 1.6%. And even the global financial crisis period, we experienced a negative 10% 4-point growth. Therefore, due to the shrinking global world trade, every economy experienced the worst economic setback, perhaps since the Great Depression in 1930s. Then big question arises: how we can revive, how we can, combat the current economic crisis. I think first we need to revive the ongoing supply chain, and by activating currently going the regional free trade agreement. Fortunately, in the middle of this devastating corona pandemic, Asia Pacific economies, basically the ASEAN 10 economies, plus China, Japan, and Korea, plus Australia and New Zealand, had succeeded in concluding the regional comprehensive economic partnership in November last year. I hope all the member economies should ratify this monumental regional free trade framework, and then I think for the sustainable co-prosperity strategy is, the way I see it, to combine the regional economic partnership plus comprehensive, progressive, the cross-Pacific partnership agreement, which was concluded, I think, 3 years ago. As a matter of fact, the US has driven very hard to conclude the TPP, but Donald Trump opted out immediately after he took the office. So here my point is that to revive a global co-prosperity strategy, especially in the Asia Pacific economies, we need to combine regional comprehensive partnership and the comprehensive progressive cross-Pacific partnership. Here, big challenge is that the CPTPP, its quality, concession rate of tariff rate, plus a market opening of domestic industry, much bigger than the RCEP. Therefore, the challenge for the RCEP economy to upgrade its quality to the level of the CPTPP, so that we can easily combine these two together. This combination, in the long run, will allow for us to realize APEC's long-cherished goal, which was alluded to 2004, Asia Pacific-wide free trade area. That is a long-term goal. But in the meantime, it will take time. We need to agree on new rules on the digital trade to make sure that the current international regional trade, could be flourishing. Well, let me stop here, and then I'll come back again. Okay. Yeah, well, okay, maybe Can I go on?
Oh, you can go on. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And another the great point is that here regional supply chain first has been affected by the a lockdown during the pandemic year, and well, Korea, for example, experienced our automobile sector has been seriously affected by the stopping of this outsourcing part and component from China, for example, the early last year. Therefore, the pandemic disrupted the ongoing regional supply chain. So we need to avoid this kind of disruption of the supply chain in the years to come, even the post the pandemic year. And second serious challenge is that how the U.S. policy against China in terms of the U.S.-China trade war, or if you like it, the technology war will unfold, especially the hegemonic leadership. Who is going to rule? Who is going to take over the leadership of the sixth generation network wireless technology? I think this is a very important point. Depending upon which way, which country take the leadership, the entire industrial restructuring, reconfiguration in the East Asia will be greatly affected. In this regard, I think the rest of the Asia Pacific economies should try to bring U.S. and China together by bringing the quality of RCEP to the level of CPTPP, under which two countries are binding each other to commit themselves to open, rule-based international trading system. So this is, I think, we need to, to look at, and constructive powers in the region should try very hard to bring these two great economic powers together to play the game on the level playing field. Okay, let me stop here, and I'll come back. Okay.
Thank you, Professor An. Now, our next presenter is Ambassador of Delegation of the European Union to the Republic of Korea, Maria Castillo-Fernandez. She used to work as ambassador to Malaysia and Indonesia, Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh were the countries that she used to work. And in Southeast Asia, she has been deeply involved in this area, and she's in Madrid right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ambassador Maria Castillo-Fernandez.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for
thank you very much, and very glad to hear Professor Han and Ambassador Kim also there in the panel. Sorry not to be in Jeju, but I hope I remember, last year we were less, but in the same conditions. A year has passed, and this pandemic, apart from the health emergency, has brought us an unprecedented economic shock that has, of course, as Professor Ann put it, touched economy and global trade. But we are becoming now more hopeful of economic recovery. At least we are all trying to put measures and strategies for that. And in particularly cross-border, with more vaccinations, cross-border travel and mobility. I think that is key for put back business and economy back on track, which is a big part that is missing. Certainly, Professor Han said this is a very diverse topic. I will try to focus on what are the two big strategies that Europe has put on: industrial first and trade second, which is mainly the blueprint that we have to transform our economies in the in the lines of digital and green. And I think we are, most of the countries are going on that direction, and how all of this has certainly made big changes to the global supply chain. Mainly what we need to achieve, and that's the title of your of this panel, is sustainable co-prosperity, and how we get to that. Mainly in the post-pandemic recovery, the EU has, the European production is looking towards, as I said, green, digital, and resilient. And one day before the WHO declared the pandemic, declared COVID-19 a pandemic, we came out with our European industrial strategy, which since then shows some other fragilities in this very big single market that Europe has, and mainly big disruptions in the global value chains that affect specific and essential products for our economies. With these new challenges and shortage of, in some cases, semiconductors, as Professor Ann has mentioned, we also found that there were all other more specific dependencies. So at the end, we say we need to update this strategy, and that was done in May. So taking up the lessons learned of a whole nearly 2 years of pandemic. And what is evident is that Europe, and you will see this terminology coming up again, needs to strengthen what we call the open strategic autonomy. What does it mean? This means that we need to continue aping the benefits of international opportunities and international cooperation, that more assertively we need to defend our interests, that we need to protect Europe's economy from unfair trade policies, and that we need to ensure a level playing field. I am saying things that Professor Han has already mentioned. What is the first lesson that came from this crisis is that we need to get a better grip in Europe's current and possible future strategic dependencies. And we took an analysis of 5,200 imported products in the EU, and we identified 137 of these products which were where we as EU were highly dependent. This represents 6% of the total value of imported goods. About half of imports for these dependent products came from China, and then Vietnam, and follow from Brazil. And from most of these products, normally it's industry itself who try to reduce these dependencies, and mainly through diversification of supply chains. But however, there is still a group of 34 products, which represents 0.6 of this total value of imported goods, which are more vulnerable and where you cannot find any potential of diversification. So mainly the clear political message here is we have to address today's dependencies in an efficient and in a target manner, and we have to work with like-minded partners such as Korea to strengthen the resilience of our supply chains, and also to establish an international order which is rule-based order. Preventing the strategic dependencies of tomorrow is our biggest challenge. And that includes inputs and advanced technologies that are vital for our green or our digital transitions. For example, batteries, semiconductors, critical raw materials, hydrogen. Clearly, we have to build our own capacities. I know Korea is also working on all these areas because, and we are launching some, what we call different industrial alliances, bringing together for all these materials producers and stakeholders, so that we can assure that the supply chain is not going to be disrupted in the future. That is the industrial part. Let me touch upon then on the trade part, which is also very important. The industrial and trade strategies are both two sides of the same coin, and they are both designed to strengthen European global competitiveness and there are a lot of synergies between them. The new trade strategy was presented in February in this new global context, and mainly tries to address the economic fallout from the pandemic, but also include climate change, growing international tensions that Professor Han mentioned, and also, and most of all, reaffirming support to a rule-based multilateral trade system. I think that is key if we want to start up a recovery that benefits all of. The three words are openness, sustainability, and assertiveness. Openness, as I said, our commitment to an open, fair, rule-based trade order, which is essential economically and politically. Our competitiveness and the whole economic recovery globally depends on it. We, as the biggest, largest trading bloc, and well integrated in all the global value chain, this is key for our resilience of our economy. Resilience of supply chain is key. Professor Han mentioned critical supply chains depend on a stable and predictable trading environment, and that means a stable rule-based trading framework. So we need to all to work for that. That means also leading WTO reform. That is very important because we need to ensure that global trade rules and practice are updated to reflect today's trade realities. Sustainability is also key in our trade strategy. Greenest is, I think our strategy is the greenest that we have ever come with, and that's a clear choice. Green and sustainable future is a key political choice. It puts the green transition, it puts the protection of labor rights at the very heart of our trade policy. But it also opens market for new green technologies and access, for the needed inputs. And this is also very, very important. At whole for business, there is a whole area of expansion in the green area, in renewables, and in new technologies, which is very important. The third point, assertiveness in this current geopolitical context. It's very important that we have the strong tools to defend our interests where necessary, part of our strategic autonomy, as I mentioned, to try to defend ourselves from a fair trade policy and to ensure a level playing field for all of us. Professor Han made reference to the free trade agreements. For us, we want now to enforce and implement to all the free trade agreements that we have been signing with so many countries and blocs in the world, to try to use the benefits of these agreements that we have negotiated. So we are going to put a big focus on enforcement and implementation. We need to also strengthen our own capacity to defend European companies and European interests when others do not play by the rules. And certainly you will see various measures that are taken in that direction. It's very important, as Professor Han, to see, RCEP and CPTPP finally ratified for someone like me who has worked in Asia for so long. When I was in Malaysia, it was very important to have those two agreements working and hope that will come. It also puts a barrier, higher in terms of free trade agreements. These free trade agreements are a little bit more with a bit more substance in terms of not only tariffs agreements. So this is also important. As you know, the agreements we are negotiated with ASEAN countries and others in the region, for us, they are perhaps a bit more ambitious and include environmental labor rights standards and other dispositions that still the Asian ones don't have. So we need to have a bit more ambitious in this sense. So overall, this crisis offers us an opportunity. Industry and trade go hand in hand for our recovery and prosperity, which needs to be green, which needs to be digital, but which give us a big challenges, as I said, in order to see how we can mainly assure that there is not this disruption of global supply chains, which has not put us, all of us, and all our companies in a lot of constraint. Let me finish with a mention of Jean Monnet. Jean Monnet, the key, one of the key European founders, who said, "We only accept change when it is necessary, and we only see necessity in the crisis." Let us continue to act together with boldness, with responsibility, and above all with a spirit of solidarity and cooperation with like-minded partners like Korea in all these areas. Thank you.
다음 연설은
Next is the former ambassador to Indonesia, Kim JongBam. And he's currently working as a co-founder and advisor at the newly established Center for Strategic and Cultural Studies, CSCS. And he has completed his diplomatic career, and he used to work as ambassador to European Union and Belgium for 3 years, from 2012 to 2015.
I'm very delighted and honored to be joining this outstanding panel of speakers. This afternoon, I think we are quite focused on how this global pandemic and also intensifying US-China competition are affecting industrial environment and whole economic landscape that we are now looking forward to address. And I think this Dr. An has very eloquently covered the general landscape of the Asia Pacific as a whole, especially with focuses on trade networks and global supply chain realignment. And my dear friend, Ambassador Maria Castillo-Fernandez, has touched upon the European perspective. So let me more or less zoom in on ASEAN, 10 member Southeast Asian nations. They are close partners and natural business co-workers, and also I think there's a major destination for Korean companies, both in production, marketing, and also now innovation as well. So my presentation is composed of 3 parts. The first one is the bouncing back of ASEAN economy in the coming years. And the second part is how ASEAN views challenges and the newly emerging industrial environment, especially the global supply chain shakeup. And the third part and the last part will be future paths for Korean business community, especially with ASEAN in mind. Let me start with the state of play by ASEAN economies. Developing Asia's economic revival is already underway, supported by a steady global recovery and relative progresses on vaccines. ASEAN region's growth is forecast, developing Asia as a whole, is forecast to be rebounding to 7.3% this year in 2021, moderating to 5%, 5.3, accurately speaking, in 2022. That's according to Asian Development Bank outlook. Despite negative impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic, overall trade growth generated by ASEAN and foreign direct investment flow into ASEAN 10 countries is showing strong signs of recovery this year. As a result of ever-intensifying US-China competition and deglobalization wave in recent years, the global supply and value chain has been increasingly regionalized. The global pandemic has accelerated such a trend at an unprecedented speed. I think that has been well elaborated by Dr. An and also Ambassador Maria Castillo. In ASEAN, lockdowns have caused the closure of businesses, stoppage of factory outputs, and disruption to manufacturing industries and their supply networks. The COVID-19 pandemic created additional difficulties to ASEAN-based firms in internationally integrated sectors. Together with US-China trade and tech rivalries, the COVID-19 pandemic is putting global supply chains to the test. Companies are in need to assess their corporate risks and build resilience. Supply chain resilience is now crucial for the survival of individual companies. Under these circumstances, global companies are pivoting some of their business operation activities and bases to ASEAN out of mainly China to diversify concentration risks and minimize disruption to their businesses. This also applies to local companies in China. While their core manufacturing capabilities remain in their home country, China, those Chinese companies also recognize that by being in only one country, they lack the flexibility to adapt geopolitical risks. Now they are exploring secondary manufacturing locations, such as in Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia, to diversify their risks and exposure. With the emergence of Vietnam as a viable manufacturing base and Indonesia gradually opening up, ASEAN has the infrastructure to encourage aspiring foreign companies, including Korean companies, to shift parts of their production bases to, for example, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. The change is underway. Change is really about having an alternative or secondary option to China. Let me move to the second part, which is ASEAN's perspectives. Given the importance of supply chains, creating an environment for seamless flow of goods within the region is high on ASEAN's agenda. The ASEAN Economic Community, so-called AEC Blueprint 2025, envisions a deeply integrated and highly cohesive ASEAN economy. Just last year, in November, ASEAN leaders at the annual summit meeting adopted the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, ACRF. It served as a consolidated exit strategy from the COVID-19 crisis. It articulates ASEAN responses through the different stages of recovery by focusing on key sectors and segments of society that are most affected by the pandemic. Take into account ASEAN's reliance on external trade and vulnerability to external shocks, ASEAN agreed upon the need to further increase intra-ASEAN trade. ASEAN trade amongst ASEAN member states currently quite low, around more or less 25%, and investment to strengthen its supply chain resilience and regional value chains. Then let me turn on Korea's future path for Korean companies. Even before the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, major Korean companies have already started to shift their production bases out of China to other places, especially to ASEAN member countries. Emerging ASEAN countries with good labor market and infrastructure are better positioned to receive diversification flows from China. They are also seeking digitalization and focusing on national and regional production to improve self-reliance and security. South Korea's economic engagement with ASEAN is uneven, with a primary focus on Vietnam, Indonesia, and Singapore. In the face of competition on ASEAN markets, mainly from Japan and China, Korea is facing the task of increasing its share in regional value chains by expanding the production base in other ASEAN countries. ASEAN's bouncing back economies present both opportunities and challenges to aspiring Korean companies. Each country in the ASEAN region has a different profile of development and offers a unique set of advantages in resources, sectors, services, and consumer market. When discussing the issue of regional strategy, companies should chart out dual strategy toward ASEAN. The first one is for specific markets, such as Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam. And the other one, the second track, is a region-wide strategy so that they can coordinate local resources for purposes such as financing, talent development, and innovation. Dr. Han has mentioned the need to combine the recently concluded Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, with the CPTPP. I think that's another big bang effect if and when that will be realized. But at this moment, I think we are now fixing our eyes on the possible RCEP being taken into effect at the sooner time. And lastly, I think given the diversity and complexity of the regulatory mechanism in ASEAN countries and the wide variation in development and infrastructure levels across the region, it is essential to develop a region-wide regional strategy for long-term success. It is not advisable to adopt an undifferentiated, one-size-fits-all strategy may not work. ASEAN's unique vulnerability to climate change, disasters, and diseases means that in addition to supply chain resilience, I think another important point is to building resilience in all sectors is a business continuity issue for every company along the supply chain. In conclusion, it is important to have a regional strategy to take advantage of ASEAN's integration, as well as the strengths of each member economy to optimize resources and develop their overall ASEAN business. We are now riding a roller coaster in global supply chain. We have experienced tremendous setback, disruption, and sharp drop in supply chain during the early phase of coronavirus pandemic. Now we are witnessing, especially in critical materials and parts, as we have seen, shortages of critical minerals, steel, copper, and even the automotive semiconductors, that sharp rise of demand in major parts and components and materials. I think so we are basically in a very tumultuous time, especially when it comes to global supply chain. So I think we should be very much prepared for the resilience and security to have sustained and stable supply chain. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다, 대사님.
Thank you for your remarks. How long do we have? Is that about 10 minutes? 20 minutes? 40? Okay, we have a lot of time. Then, is there any question or topics to discuss? Is there any? Would you like to start?
Two ambassadors, eloquently presented the importance of the ongoing supply chain, and we need to revive the supply chain resilience, as much as possible, even in the middle of this, pandemic and the post-pandemic era, even in the middle of the U.S.-China, strategic competition. Here, let me point out that the importance of the RCEP here again. RCEP, of course, has fundamental limitations compared to CPTPP. First, RCEP lacks a chapter on the environment, okay, which we have been, emphasizing the importance of the carbon neutrality this morning. And RCEP also lacks on the labor standard. Okay? Also, most importantly, RCEP lacks investor-state dispute clause. On top of this, far lower the concession rate in the tariff as well as market opening. So in this regard, the quality of RCEP is far lower than CPTPP. Therefore, the great challenge for here Asia Pacific regional economies which signed up RCEP is should upgrade the RCEP as much as possible after effectuating, as early as possible, hopefully, sometime this year. If this happens, this is going to reinforce ongoing the regional supply chain and to make sure that the supply chain resilience is right there, is protected by the agreed upon the regional free trade agreement. And another important point is that this is, in a sense, as far as I'm concerned, it's very good news. President of China, Xi Jinping, indicated that China would be very much interested in joining CPTPP at the sideline of the APEC meeting last year. If this happens, okay, this would be a great step forward to amalgamate CPTPP and RCEP. But here is a great challenge for China, to do, whether this is a political rhetoric or China is a true intention is right there. First, China should address, okay, the very hot debated issue. China continues to provide a state subsidy for the state-owned enterprises. And second, a lot of the Western economies raise questions on the China adhere to the international principle of intellectual property right. And the third, China also stays on the international sort of level of playing field in terms of the state investor state dispute. So these three things must be resolved for China to be admitted to the CPTPP. But the point is that at least President Xi Jinping indicated that China is willing to consider joining CPTPP. So in a sense, this is great gesture for China. I hope China will stay on its firm commitment to carry on domestic reforms to meet this CPP standard. Another point I would like to share with my colleagues is that the CPTPP for the first time allows Japan, Korea, China, three countries are interconnected indirectly. Korea, Japan, we do not have any bilateral agreement, although we do have a bilateral agreement between Korea and China. But Korea, Japan, no, we do not. However, CPTPP allows us for Korea, Japan to engage in, although it's very low quality, sort of bilateral, the free trade agreement. Therefore, I would like to suggest, okay, China, Japan, and Korea CJKFTA has been negotiated almost now 10 years, but we have made, very little progress. So this, as CJK, as signatory member of the RCEP, will provide us new momentum for three countries to engage very actively trilateral FTA. If this happens, this is a great, great achievement for the, not only regional supply resilience, but also to play the three major economies as in the manufacturing hub of the region to play the game on the rule-based. Three countries can really play a great leadership to combine, together a fragmented East Asian economy, as well as to bring the U.S. Okay, through the CPTPP, and great the progress we can make along this. And let me make this one point. China-U.S. and the rivalry. Okay, Prime Minister of Singapore Lee Hsien Loong suggested that ASEAN 10 economies also very deeply connected with the China, perhaps greater the trade linkage and the foreign direct investment linkage than United States. ASEAN also very significantly linked with the R&D and service trade with the financial trade with the United States. Therefore, ASEAN members, they would not like to see the situation arriving in which ASEAN should choose either the U.S. or China. I think Korea, we are also at the same position. We should avoid any international circumstance environment in which Korea should pick up either U.S. or China. We need to avoid that. The reason for Korea to do this is very clear. For example, Korea is pushing very hard. Battery is a future rising industry for Korea. Although we do have a globally well-known manufacturing facilities, starting from the LG, SK, the Samsung, the SDI batteries, so on, so on. But the raw materials to manufacture battery, 60% of the cobalt, production and the lithium the materials coming from China. So if China stops supplying those key the raw material intermediate goods to Korea to manufacture battery, Korean batteries nowhere to go. So this is another clear indication that we should see that the Korea-China remain to be very closely linked. We should not be a victim of the fallout due to intensified the rivalry between U.S. and China. My another agony is that Biden administration is pushing very hard to take the hegemonic leadership at least over the 6G wireless network technology. Although U.S. fall behind China in terms of the 5G, fifth generation wireless network, but United States is now, seems to be determined to regain the championship in this area. That's why President Biden invited a bunch of all the electronic, the multinational corporations, Taiwan and Korea, to White House, to encourage them to invest in the United States. Or while we might do that, but on the condition that, we should be connected in terms of the basic, the raw material, the linkage with the China. And therefore, I think the East Asian economies should work very hard to raise our own voice, destructive consequences of the U.S.-China rivalry would be very much detrimental. Well, in this regard, Ambassador Fernandez, what I would like to ask that how European Union is view the, rising China. I know that the European Union signed up the bilateral investment EU-China Comprehensive Investment Treaty, and it's not been effectuated yet. So how you view this EU-China the technology linkage, and furthermore, I'm very much interested in knowing more about this. EU's intention over CPTPP, because the United Kingdom expressed, UK is ready to join. Delivered the written sort of the application form to become a member of CPTPP. If this happens, the whole picture would be very much different. If European Union would like to be a part of the rising Asia-Pacific economy, somehow you should be formally connected to CPTPP or even the RCEP. That's what I would like to make recommendation.
Okay, Ambassador Maria Fernandez, can you answer the question? Are you ready to answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Professor. And let me also make a little bit of comment to what Ambassador Kim was mentioned, because the relation between Europe and ASEAN is very, very close. It's also strategic. And we have been working many years to help this ASEAN economic community unfold. Behind that, it's an enormous work from Europe, a lot of cooperation and support to create the basis of that community. And I've seen, as Ambassador Kim, I imagine when he was in Jakarta, I've seen it in Malaysia working half-half. You mentioned vulnerabilities. There is still the enforcement part. If you go to the border between Malaysia and Singapore, which should be the ASEAN border that should work the best in terms of mobility of goods, and there's still a lot to do. And I don't tell you if you go up to Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, and others. So the need to create that space where goods and services really work together is still difficult to do. So there is a lot of implementation part to be done. The second is you mentioned business are going to ASEAN. I've seen it there. This is part of the diversification. Korean business do that. European business are there, but and they have a lot of regional offices or regional headquarters in ASEAN. But one important thing that has come from the crisis is the mobility, and how do you respond to the crisis. And when I was in Malaysia a year ago, we were there battering the pandemic, and the fact that the country is closed completely and don't allow any business, and even the business people who were living there couldn't even come in, couldn't go out. The families were separated. If you have a regional business, you couldn't even go and check anything. This has created enormous problems. And this has created also business to reconsider if that is the best place to be in a regional way, to put a regional center there. So this is still, I think, one consideration we forget. But if there is another pandemic, and probably we will have, how do you react, and how do you allow business to be able to continue business continuity? At the beginning, it was closed. Business couldn't even work. So I think the governments will have to think about that in very detailed terms. Then certainly your questions, Professor, and start with the last one. UK is not anymore part of the EU, so they are finding other ways to to link themselves to other trade agreements. We have, with most of the countries that are part of the CPTPP FTAs agreement, which are far more ambitious, as I mentioned in my first presentation, than the RCEP and CPTPP itself. When I was in Malaysia, we were trying to continue our FTA, and the problem was they didn't want to go more ambitious than TPP, and we were asking more because for us those two agreements, the ambitious is very low, so we would not. I don't think we will be part of them. We have already agreements with most of the partners, very, very high level ambitious agreements. You mentioned environment, we mentioned labor and rights. We also have, non-tariff barriers and other dispositions which go beyond what all the two agreements have. So I don't see how we are going to go lower, and when we already have this network or noodles of agreements with most of the countries, and we are now trying to finalize with the US. So we have the framework already. So I don't see that happening. We are with ASEAN. I think the pending issue is our ASEAN EU FTA. We have very ambitious agreements with Vietnam and Singapore already, still negotiating with Malaysia, Philippines and Thailand and Indonesia. So when all these building blocks are there, our ultimate goal is to have an ambitious agreement with ASEAN. And then we have the whole block. Then that is the missing link. But of course, we are not going to go lower, because then we have the blockage of the parliament, which is what is happening with the agreement with China. Our level of ambition has to be that, otherwise we cannot pass through our parliament and even the member state countries' parliament. So those ambitions is there. We share some of the concerns that the US has versus China. I've mentioned it also. Fair trade, it's very important, and certainly there are a lot of unfair trade measures. Dumping subsidies, the role of the SOEs, which is part of was tried to be tackled in the TPP, I remember, and then it was put aside. Countries like Vietnam and Malaysia also have problems, but we did it with Vietnam, so we managed to deal SOEs with Vietnam, so why not with the other countries in our bilateral? And certainly state capitalism. So yes, we do share some of the concerns. We are going to address them in other ways. There is going to be measures coming at European level that address unfair trade competition and assure a level playing field, as you mentioned, which is certainly key. But we certainly think that there is the WTO, as I mentioned, which is the framework where we need to try and reform it, and we need to try to push that those changes with China. We cannot do that without China. And multilateral engagement, and this is trade. Global trade needs to benefit everyone, and we need to bring all the actors in, and certainly lower tensions. The agreement on investment with China, as you know, is now blocked in the European Parliament, who needs to ratify it, and because there are many considerations that come out for them. Labor issues, human rights, and others, and it's still for the moment they're waiting the green light for ratification.
Thank you for your answer. Thank you for your comment. Ambassador Kim, you have any comments and questions?
Well, let me just share with you 3 points that I may add. One is, I think that's for not only for Korean business community, but also for all the entrepreneurs across the globe. Major economies are all adopting and undertaking green and digital economic recovery plan. Well, President Biden has just were able to pass, make an agreement with the U.S. Capitol Hill on the large-scale infrastructure plan. And Korean government is also undertaking a Green New Deal. In case of European Union, I think that the European Union has been at the forefront of undertaking green new recovery. So I think there are some opportunities envisioned by these kind of cohesive strategies that are being undertaken by major economies in building up energy transition and to try to come up with eco-friendly policies and investment, and how to come up with clean energy, climate action-related measures, and also to make more investment into alternative energy resources such as hydrogen. So I think there are new opportunities unfolding ahead of the business communities across the globe, especially for Korean companies. I think there are ample rooms to be taken advantage of. And the second point is that localization. I think that in order to secure stable and sustained supply chain, I think there's, while trying to be resilient on that supply chain network, but also at the same time to be more focused on regionalization and localization. Maybe I could just cite one example, that is Hyundai Motor Group, which is now setting up a complete manufacturing plant of vehicles in Indonesia. Indonesia will be the largest manufacturing hub for Hyundai Motor Company. So the plan is to complete the construction of that manufacturing plant by the end of this year, and will be starting to produce 150,000 units of vehicles from early part of next year. And that particular strategy is very much unique because they are not bringing in so-called Korean subcontractors or the vendors to Indonesia. Almost about 75% of the parts and components will be manufactured, will be supplied from local suppliers, Indonesian parts and components manufacturers, which is a bit different from other foreign automakers like Japanese ones. So that localization efforts will be hopefully serving as a stabilizer and buffer in avoiding any disruptions, future disruptions in regional or global supply chain. So that is one approach that are now being undertaken by Korean companies. The last one is that maybe since my dear friend Ambassador Maria Castillo is here with us, we have to take a very serious look at what United States and European Union are now working together in forging kind of the trade and tech cooperative framework. The recent President Biden's summit with the EU leaders in Brussels just last week, they have agreed upon the formation of so-called US-EU, EU-US Trade and Tech Council, which is the first time ever. So we feel that the European Union and United States are joining hands in setting up a kind of platform to create new rules to steer away any kind of the unfair practices from foreign countries, and to chart out new standards. So that is, I think there's another factor that we have to pay attention to, especially for Korean companies in making any endeavors for innovative and new technology advancement. I will stop here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your view, especially about Korean manufacturing. Yeah. Thank you for your opinion. Ambassador Mario Fernandez, are you giving any opinion, any comments about Ambassador Kim's?
Well, it's. I think yes, Ambassador Kim made a very good point at the end that we haven't highlighted so much. I mean, I was at the beginning mentioned that we need to set up a rule-based international order taking account all the new realities, and I was trying to refer to that. It's very important to get together, not only with the US, but we are always reaching to our like-minded partners, a lot to Korea in our different dialogues, digital and others, to try to help us set the norms and the standards. So we need, this is a new area. We are all going into this, but we cannot go without norms. We need predictability. We need an environment to which also, everyone can benefit. And we need a rule-based environment, and this is a new area, digital, also green, and we need to set norms that are rule-based. So yes, with the US, as Ambassador rightly said, we established this Trade and Technical Council, which is a first attempt to try and see which are the rules that are there, always ensuring level playing field, fair trade and sustainable trade. Fair trade is very important. We all have that problem all over, and we cannot operate in an unfair trade environment. So this is, and we will see different norms coming out also from the EU side, which will tackle these issues in order to, as I said, be more assertive and defend our interests. And this is very important. But this is not only for US and EU. This has to be broader. We could already sit us and discuss, but this is open, and I think we are all doing it with other partners, trying to see slowly how we can then define these norms, and that will be, benefit for all.
Kim Jong.
Yes, please. Yeah. Professor, please go ahead.
Now, let me make some additional comment. First, Ambassador Kim also, as well as Ambassador Fernandez, pointed out that the importance of the role of the Malaysia and Indonesia, some ASEAN the members, and I totally agree with you that. Let me point out also one thing. I mentioned that the importance of the amalgamating CPTPP and RCEP. Here we have some good the candidate to play as an honest broker. For example, 7 economies, which belongs to the RCEP, also belongs to CPTPP, starting from Japan, Australia, Malaysia, Brunei, and Vietnam, so forth. So these countries, they, since they belong to the high-level CPTPP as well as low quality of the RCEP, therefore they understand how the RCEP members can upgrade the system to match the level of the CPTPP. So in this regard, I think that Korea can contribute a great deal because we expressed, Korea is considering favorably to join the CPTPP. So along this line, we have a great possible alliance between Korea and ASEAN. In fact, the ASEAN is Korea's key supply chain partners, even extending beyond ASEAN to India. And the second point is that I think I want to emphasize the importance of the digital trade. Pandemic brought us the importance of the digital trade and economic digitalization far faster than what we expected. Untech industries, after all, the uprising. Therefore, digital trade should be agreed by a standard rule. Many, countries involved in the international trade. So I think in this regard, data flow, including data privacy, must be worked out, and also digital service trade is another critical, element in expediting the digital trade. 3D printing, for example, we just cannot distinguish it's data flow or service trade. Therefore, digital trade involves a manufacturing trade and the service trade. The distinction between two of them is very blurry. As a result, all the member economies, trade-oriented economies, must agree on the basic rules on digital trade, how to deal with the data privacy and also, the service element of the, digital trade. In this regard, I think the European Union and all the ASEAN members, including the United States, can work together. In a sense, I was so happy that the President Biden organized a G7 meeting in London, inviting Korea, India, and South Africa, and so on, as an observer, to make sure that digital trade will come through. And furthermore, United States made a firm commitment by returning the Paris Agreement and adhering to multilateralism. In this regard, I think the pandemic also changing the U.S. leadership, set up a new stage for the world economy to bounce back from these devastating consequences of this pandemic. In this regard, I think the, Ambassador Fernandez, the European Union, I think it's work together with all the East Asian economies to agree on the digital trade rules and bring that as a key agenda in WTO, so that WTO can play very active role in promoting the global trade as well as global foreign direct investment.
Thank you very much for your comment. As we will receive any questions from the floor. Any questions or any comments? We welcome any. Yes, please.
My question to Dr. An, there was a press report that England they want to join CTPPT. So do you think it is appropriate to accept England as a member of that treaty? And as you mentioned, Korea is favorable considering that CPTPP favorably, but Korea is still not a member. But a country out of this Asian Pacific, like England, if they want to join and if they accept it, is it appropriate to them before they accept the country in the region?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm really delighted that the ambassador, the minister, foreign minister Kim JongBam brought up this issue. I personally really welcome the UK's initiative to join CPTPP. UK actually delivered a written the request to become a membership. I think this is a great sign to combine Asia Pacific economies, one representative economy of the Europe, and furthermore the UK will elevate the generally agreed framework of the CPTPP, and I personally hope that Korea should work together to join the CPTPP, because Japan is, in a sense, very much, reluctant to accept Korea as a new member of CPTPP. Therefore, Korean strategy is to join simultaneously with another, the economies, either the UK or the US. And if UK joins and somehow the US will return to CPTPP to make a expanded TPP, far bigger than original TPP 12 members. And then this will set up a great stepping stone to enlarge a free and liberal trade order in the world, and which might be very influential to make sure that the global economy will move around that direction. On top of that, I mentioned that it's President Xi Jinping of China expressed China's interest to join the CPTPP. If this is not a political rhetoric, if China really committed by going through all the domestic reforms to meet the entry standard of CPTPP, I think the global economy would be very good shape. If that happens, maybe European Union also might join the CPTPP. This will realize our humankind dream, a universal, rule-based, liberal, the unified trading system, global perspective, globally. Thank you.
Yes, I think Professor An is more ambitious than anyone else. I think even much more ambitious than Ambassador Maria Fernandez, I think, yeah. Yes, any other questions, any other comments? We have around 4 minutes left. Okay, any other comments, ambassadors? Miss Ambassador Maria Fernandez, any other comments? Professor? Yes. Okay, then I will make one last comment. I really appreciate Ambassador Kim's comment about Korean industry. I think ironically, Korean industry, especially Korean manufacturing, ironically pursue two things. First of all, globalization, and second of all, as just Ambassador Kim told us, the localization also. As just Professor An said, the diversification of the supply chain is considered extremely important for the Korean manufacturers. Not because pandemic, because kind of very turmoil political situation. I think in this past 10 years, just this kind of risk of supply chain is not just come from the pandemic. Pandemic aggravate that kind of supply chain. Even before the pandemic, we begin to have that kind of risk, like the tension between especially China and US. We, as just Professor An mentioned, we do not want, especially Korean manufacturers is in dilemma, and we do not want to choose one of either one of them. But somehow when we are pushed, because we don't have any we don't have any option. Yeah, we have to prepare the worst situation that that kind of political situation. So the political situation now very big big impact to the business community in Korea. So I just want to finish that comment. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the three speakers. Thank you very much. Thank you, ambassadors. Thank you.
네, 다시 한번 좌장님 발표 질의응답에 참여해주신 분들께 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 네, 그럼 잠시 후 휴식 시간을 갖고 5시 10분부터
So we are going to take a brief break, and then we will begin the next session at 5:10. Thank you.